So a few days ago, someone set our church on fire. And I'm making this video today because I have some personal experience with fire. In the second grade, my church went out to do some Christmas caroling. We went to nursing homes. We went to homes of members of the church, other churches that kind of lost mobility or they're caregivers now, so they don't really get out. We just go sing. We weren't good singers, but we just went out, and it always uplifted our hearts. It uplifted our own hearts because we're giving that spirit, and you can just feel it all around. Well, at the end of that night, I'm in the second grade. We get home, and as we're driving into the neighborhood, I see this huge ball of smoke in the air. And I remember poking at my brother because he's 3 years older than me. We're always fussing back and forth. It's like, oh my gosh, dude, that's our house. That's our house. Completely playing. But it turns out it was absolutely 100% our house. So after spending the whole night giving to other people, giving our time, giving what little musical ability we have to these people, we come home and our house is on fire. And like I said, we were Christmas caroling, so Christmas is done. All of the presents, the house was totaled. I remember standing in the front yard just looking, and I saw my brother's GT Performer bike. We weren't rich, but that bike was that was the rich kid's bike. That was like his prized possession. And I had a Dyno Air. That was it. That was our mode of transportation. That was our freedom. That was like part of our identity back then. And I remember that fire was so hot, it was just melting in the garage. And I don't look back on any of that negatively at all. At all. Another thing that I remember is the firemen bringing out my dog. They put him on oxygen. Seems like such an insignificant thing to remember, but that stuck with me because the house is blazing. The neighbors' houses are at risk right now. I remember 3 or 4 different fire departments showed up at our house. One or a couple, I'm sure we're fighting the fire at our house, but there were others soaking our neighbors' houses so that the fire didn't spread to the whole neighborhood. I remember the dog getting oxygen. I remember my best friend's mom. I called her. I was like, hey, my house is burning down, because I'm in second grade. So, hey, how you doing? Cool, my house is burning down. And I can't even imagine what she was thinking on the other end of that phone call. But she took me in that night. And my brother had somewhere to go. My sister had somewhere to go. My parents had somewhere to go. We didn't spend a night without a roof over our heads. We didn't miss a meal. We didn't miss Christmas. There was such an outpouring of love from the community, from the schools, presents, money, clothes, whatever. We had the clothes on our back. I remember mine was a Ninja Turtle t-shirt. It was white. It had all 4 of them. I remember it vividly. That's what I remember. I remember total strangers caring. So 2 nights ago, our church caught fire. Apparently a homeless man had taken a couple of bales of hay that we had, probably left over from a fall get together or something like that, stacked them up and made a fire. We assume because he needed to be warm. It's cold. We're in the middle of February. Made a fire, caught fire to our ceiling, went into our youth room, and at that point our sprinkler system engaged and stopped the rest of the building from engulfing in flames. And it's times like that tests your resolve. So a few weeks prior to that, I had just started getting involved in youth. And then the week prior, we had a leadership meeting for the youth. Spent 2.5 hours of just setting intentions for what we want, what message we want to get across to our youth. our vision, our collective vision, as we each do our individual tasks. It's powerful. And then that same week, the youth is the one wing of the church that really is affected by this fire. Our church is not near like Commerce, not near a bus station, not near anything like that. The homeless man had a shopping cart that he had pushed down one state road, and you have to take another state road about a quarter mile to a half mile down the road. There's a couple neighborhoods, but really it's just country road to get to the next town. There's no reason that person should have been there, but they were. And just giving him grace, saying this wasn't arson and he was just attempting to be warm, caught the church on fire. So how do we look at that? How do you look at that and not get bitter and resentful and angry and self-righteous, fall into despair, think, why are we even doing this if this is the kind of stuff that happens in this world? There's so much evil in this world. That's not the way to look at it. The first thing that popped into my mind was we're on the exact right path. Those intentions we set, we're on. We are so on that the enemy sent an attack. And I'm not saying that the man that started the fire is evil. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I am saying that we are in the middle of a war, and the way that these powers are waging against each other, something as simple as, I don't know what causes homeless, mental illness, addiction, whatever those strongholds are on that man's life, led him to fulfill an act against the church. And so instead of cursing this man or giving in to flesh by, being angry and letting rage fill your heart and not letting love shine through, that's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to know that when you set intentions, expect disruption to come. If you're on a path, the good path, the path against the enemy, he is going to fight back. And so when you have struggles, when you have any kind of trials, it reminds me of James. Dear brothers, when you suffer trials of any kind, consider it pure joy. And he talks about how the suffering, it stirs an endurance in you, and it does a work in you, and that eventually leads to hope and a brighter future. And much easier said than done, but there's so much truth to it. It's all throughout the Bible. You look at Joseph. Joseph had a ton of brothers, and his dad gives him this really nice robe, and Joseph has this dream about how he's going to be exalted over his brothers. How do you think that went with his brothers? Well, it went well enough that his brothers sold him into slavery. Joseph ends up getting imprisoned. But then the end of that story is there's a huge famine going on, and Joseph saves his family because of his entire path. He had this anointing that he was going to be exalted over his brothers, and then he had this disappointing, all of these horrible things that happened. And then at the end, he becomes the type of man that can forgive his brothers, give them food during a famine, could have had all of them killed in the position that he was in, but he chose to extend love and mercy, saved his family in the meantime. Think about Jesus himself. You hear the nativity story, you hear all the things that go on after, this period of his life that's not really well documented. You never hear about Satan tempting Jesus or coming after him from after his birth until he's baptized by John the Baptist. If you look at that passage, it says John the Baptist baptizes him, says the Spirit of the Lord fell upon Jesus like a dove, and then an audible voice for all to hear says, "This is my Son, in whom I am well pleased." And the moment that is spoken out, Jesus gets his calling, that anointing. The very next chapter is Jesus going out into the wilderness to fast, to prepare for what is coming, and Satan meets him there to tempt him. You look at David. David gets anointed by Samuel to be the king. The same David that slays Goliath. But he doesn't just become a king. He actually gets chased by King Saul for years, Saul trying to kill him, before he actually steps into his actual purpose there at the end. There is a reason for this season of disappointing, and it develops you into who you need to be so that when you get to where you're going, you are strong enough to stay there. One thing that believers and non-believers alike struggle with is like, how do I hear the voice of God? How do I see God at work? And I think the thing is, we're looking for something that's just like miraculous, and that stuff does happen. But sometimes it's happening all around us, and we just don't have the eyes to see it or the ears to hear it. I'm going to end this with an illustration of exactly that. If you look in the book of 1 Kings, it's the story of Elijah. Elijah's a prophet from God. He's sent to a king and basically saying, hey, this woman that you've married that has your people worshiping this God, it's not right. There's only one God, and I'm speaking for him right now. And obviously that causes some friction. It sends Elijah out running for his life because they're trying to kill him. He comes back and he eventually says, look, let's put your God up against my God. So we're going to make 2 altars. We're going to burn 2 bulls, sacrifices to our gods. You pick which altar you want. We're going to put some wood together. We're going to put the bull on it, and we're going to have your God light the fire. That's how it's going to go. And his prophets, the false prophets, they can't light that fire. Well, Elisha's turn comes up, and he says, you know what? Yeah, make this altar, but let's pour water on it. Takes 4 huge jugs of water. Guys, pour the water on the altar. Tells him to do that 3 times. So 12 of these huge jugs of water gets poured onto this altar. And then Elijah says, God, it's your time. And the fire of God comes down and burns up that altar, sucks up all that water. And there's absolutely no doubt who's the real God. It's crazy to see something like that. And then there's more times when he's on the run and God's feeding him through ravens. Ravens are bringing food to him. There's more times he's on the run and he's like, I'm just ready to die. I've done enough. And he wakes up out of a nap one time and there's baked bread sitting on coals waiting for him. All of these things he sees. And then eventually he's hiding in a cave. We're in chapter 9, verse 11. God's like, what are you doing in the cave? And verse 11, the Lord said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. And then the voice spoke to him. All of that to say, God's working in your life all around you. You may just be looking for something that's much more amazing, much more hard to believe, miracles all the time. But really, he's trying to talk to you in a still small voice, and we're so distracted by all of this stuff in life. How often do you spend in actual silence? No TV in the background, no music, no podcast, just silence. We always talk about praying as praying to God. Well, if God is the source of all love and all wisdom, wouldn't it behoove us to listen to God? To make it a practice of not just telling him thank you and asking him for what we want, but to say, God, here I am. Like, humble yourself. I don't have the answers. I don't even know what to ask for, but I'm going to be silent and I'm going to let you speak. Or when you're looking at a tragedy and you're thinking, where's God in all of this? Just stop and let him speak to you. We live in this microwave society where we want things to happen our way and we want them to happen immediately. And that kind of stuff, it flashes bright and then it fizzles out, you know? That is not the stuff that lasts. What God is calling you to is a life devoted to trying to see things from His point of view so that you can move in the way that He wants you to move, and you can fight for the good guys in this battle that's happening all around you. I'm not upset that my church caught fire. I'm not mad at the man that was in such a state that he felt he needed to light hay bales on fire underneath a church overpass. To get mad and angry and fall into despair misses the entire point. This is an opportunity to act in such a way that you are showing that you are trying to be the hands and feet of Jesus and to serve other people the way He wants us to serve, and that's with love. So I encourage you to do that today.